Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Courtside with Beilinson Tennis, part of the Tennis Channel Podcast Network. Pleased to be joined once again with my co-host and Hall of Famer, Steve Flink. Steve, we have a wide variety of topics to talk about today. Ready to roll? This will be a fun one.
Sure, looking forward to it.
Yeah, let's start with our good friend, our old friend. He may not consider himself old, but Andy Murray. He's now 35 years old, playing very well. Beats Stefanos Tsitsipas and Nick Kyrgios in Stuttgart 2 weeks ago. Pulls out this past week with an abdominal strain. Hopefully it's something very minor. Now being back in the top 50 in the world, he's still not going to be ranked, which is obviously dangerous to himself and his opponents. You can look at it both ways like that. He's playing very well. Again, we'll do another episode in about, 5-6 days that we can talk about the draw specifically. As of this recording, the draw is not out yet. If things fall right, he could make a deep run in Wimbledon with how he's currently playing.
I agree. I think it'll depend on a few things, David. We were both bemoaning the fact that last year and into the earlier stages of this year, Andy couldn't seem to get through matches quickly enough to protect himself for the latter rounds because it would catch up to him physically. He is doing a much better job of that, of winning some straight set matches and preserving energy. And he did play very well, as you said, in Germany with those great wins and a good match with Berrettini. But I think that it'll be interesting to see how he holds up in best of five. And can he get through the best of five matches efficiently? Because even with a day off, if he's getting in five setters in the first couple of rounds, it's tough to recover. So that may be one of the keys, but I just get the feeling that the presence of Lendl, and there are a lot of things working in Andy's favor right now. And in some ways, he's exceeded his own expectations. So it's going to be really interesting to see how his draw plays out and how Andy responds with those crowds, as usual, supporting him vociferously.
Yeah, I think, and hearing from him in post-match interviews and everything, you kind of get the feeling that he's comfortable with himself right now. He's happy with the way he's playing. Again, the rankings getting up there. The danger is he's still not seeded. So, he could get a very, very tough first round opponent, but if he keeps on improving, the ranking will come and hopefully he can get seeded at some of these events where he may not have such a dangerous draw early on.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I do believe that there are a number of the lower seeds that he could handle. So he just wants to avoid somebody in the upper crust, the top 6, 7, 8. But aside from that, I think he can turn the draw in his favor if he makes a strong start. And it certainly never hurts to have those crowds so fervently behind you, as he inevitably will.
Yeah, I want to throw out a few other names to you. And again, we don't have the draw, so we'll kind of keep it high level, just general thoughts on how you think they'll do over the next, hopefully for their sake, 2 weeks at Wimbledon. Some favorites, some dark horses. I think we're all looking forward to seeing a good performance from Felix Auger-Aliassime. He has the game to play very, very well at this event.
Yes, and he's come off a string of really good majors, and with a little bit of luck, he would have beaten Rafa and Roland Garros, and who knows what that could have led to. Felix seems to be becoming a pretty good big occasion player, and he's an all-surface player, and beat Zverev on the grass at Wimbledon last year. He knows what he's doing. So I feel like he's primed to go deep into that draw. I don't see him winning the tournament, but it wouldn't shock me if Felix got to his first major final. He's been knocking on the door. That wouldn't shock me with the right set of circumstances that he could pull that off.
One name we just found out, breaking news, we don't know the details yet, but Sebastian Korda, who we were going to talk about, supposedly he's out of Wimbledon. We don't know the details yet, but that's unfortunate because you remember last year he had that crazy match with Kachyanov in the round of 16. He lost 10-8 in the fifth where no one could hold serve, which was quite odd. But if he is indeed out and injured, hopefully he gets healthy soon because we still have such high expectations for Sebi.
Yeah, he's been absolutely, we do, with good reason. I just get concerned about these injuries, and I hope that's not a recurrent pattern in his career where it keeps sort of stalling him, because he's a great player to watch when he's at full force physically, and it's a shame that he would not be able to go back. Obviously, that was a great run last year, and he was so close to getting himself into the quarters. So I I hope we see him early in the hard court season, that he can start really peaking again as we get closer to the US Open.
And the name everyone follows, whether it's good or bad, but it's definitely makes people keep their eyes on the sport of tennis. Nick Kyrgios, he himself thinks he's top 5, top 10 in the world on grass. He has shown glimpses of it. He's playing very well currently, just beat Stefanos Tsitsipas and Halle. You know what he did to Rafa back in 2014. That was ways ago. Now, Rafa has played him since on Wimbledon, and Rafa's won, but there have been tight matches. Nick plays very well. The same story, though. Can he do it 2 weeks and 3 out of 5?
Yeah, and can he keep his head screwed on straight? You know, that's always the big thing with Nick, is his composure and avoiding unnecessary altercations with the officials. He's done a pretty good job of that the last few weeks, and he really has looked physically good and largely in control of his emotions. So I think, you know, and I know some of the Australians, I think there's a feeling that he may really make his best showing at Wimbledon in a long, long time this year, that he's ready to do that. And the match he just lost last week to Hurkacz was a beauty. You know, it really just came down to Nick losing a couple of tiebreakers after taking the first set. So, and he didn't lose his cool, and he went up and shook hands when it was over, and it was a good sport, but played a first-rate match in defeat against a great player in Hurkacz. So I believe that he and nobody wants to see his name in those early rounds.
He's unseeded as well, right? So I mean, if you're anyone not named Andy Murray or Nick Kyrgios, you don't want to see either of those in your side early on in the tournament.
But Kyrgios in this physical state is very dangerous. You know, there are times when you sense that he's not 100% physically, and you can see it in the way he's moving and how he's serving. But no, all the signs are there that he's ready on that trajectory. So I'm fascinated to see what he produces at Wimbledon, and you know, he may be one of the more compelling characters in that first week, because I mean, I sense there could be some big center court match involving Nick in those first couple of rounds.
No doubt, no doubt. 2 players who had incredible runs last year. Herbert Hurkacz, who made it to the semis last year, I believe. Matteo Berrettini made it to the finals, losing to Novak. They just had very impressive weeks. Both won their respective tournaments. Hurkacz and Halle destroyed Daniil Medvedev. That was an impressive, as all get out from Hurkacz there. Matteo Berrettini also won in Queens. Both those guys, you know, Hurkacz is someone interesting to me. He's been good for now a long period of time. I think people don't, when they talk about big contenders at big tournaments, or they talk about the big 3 and all people who could really make noise, I think his name gets overlooked quite a bit. He's been pretty consistent at a high level now for more than just, you know, you could say a flash in the pan or a couple tournaments. He's been good for a while now.
Oh, no doubt about it. And you know, he's such an aggressive player with, you know, probably one of the most underrated serves in the game. It's a great first serve, especially, and a pretty darn good second one, and dangerous off the ground. He can stay in points, but he takes control of them as well. Moves so well for a big man. And yes, he played a good final. Medvedev imploded a bit, had a little spat with his coach, but so be it. He was already in a lot of trouble against Hurkacz in that final. So I don't think it was really had that big a bearing on the outcome. No, he feels good. He's won this ATP 500 event coming in. And yes, he remembers last year defeating Roger Federer and getting to the semis. So he's really looking forward to going back on those grounds. And I expect to see him in those latter stages of the tournament again. He's another one, David, that could be one of a surprise finalist. Who knows what happens then? But he's certainly a great player on any fast court.
I want to mention a couple of guys, and you know how much I enjoy talking about the lower level guys, quote unquote lower level guys. You know, the margins are so thin in this sport, and when you consider someone a lower level guy, you don't realize how small the margins are and how good these guys are. And we had quite a performance 2 weeks ago from a guy named Tim van Rijthoven. He was ranked 205 in the world, wins a title. All he did there was beat FAA and Daniil Medvedev. So beat 2 of the very best in the game.
David, you know what? He squeaked by FAA. And I remember watching that and thinking, boy, Felix, I was surprised Felix didn't play the big points a little better down the stretch. I thought that was the kind of match Felix should have pulled out. But then this guy destroyed Medvedev in the final. So no, it was those were great back-to-back performances from a guy, as you said, 205 in the world at the time. And now he's pushing hard, and he's again going to be one of those dangerous floaters in the draw at Wimbledon, to be sure.
I mean, you get a wild card. He gets a wild card into Wimbledon. That's worth around $60,000. I mean, that's a huge payday for guys like this, and a person who I respect in the tennis industry, and everybody loves him. He's so great. Former USTA national coach. He's the current Oklahoma State men's head tennis coach, Dustin Taylor. He would say, you are only a week away from changing your career, and guys at that level, it's so true, right? You can have 1 week, and it's a life-changing week, which could change the course of your career. Interesting to see how Tim does. Another guy that we're all familiar with. He was number 8 in the world. He's fallen off the singles radar. He's slowly creeping his way back in. We all know phenomenal doubles player he is. Jack Sock. He lost a tough challenger final yesterday, 7-6 in the third, was up a break, also at a match point. He's creeping back into the top 100. I think he was 2 spots out from the main draw. If he had won that match, it was a direct, you got a wild card into the main draw. He's in the qualies now. He's playing better. We saw him. He was always kind of a good big match type of player. We saw him play Stefanos Tsitsipas, very tough in Indian Wells. He had many opportunities to win that match. He's getting back up there. We just like that course of keep going, keep getting better and better and better.
Yeah, he's got to keep his commitment. You know, he's had a tendency to be a little hot-headed. We know he's excelled more in doubles than singles, but it's nice to see him making this all-out effort right now. And a big part of the story will be told from here through the U.S. Open. He's got to make a substantial move during that stretch. And I think if he keeps applying himself the way he is, and on grass and then shifting to hard courts, there's no reason he can't certainly start heading toward the top 50 again.
I agree. No disagreement for me there. Some veteran names that had some news in the past few days. Roger Federer and Serena Williams. Let's start with Roger, and I've said it, and I hope I'm wrong, and it's looking like I am going to be wrong. I said Roger's last match may be at the Laver Cup playing doubles with Rafa. I thought it would be a wonderful way to go out. The way Roger's talking, he's focused on Laver Cup. He's focused on Basel in 2022, and then hopefully being healthy and playing 2023. He looks great. Hopefully physically he feels great as well.
Yeah, it's so commendable in one sense, because he's about to turn 41 in the summer. So the major part of this comeback would be launched as he approaches 42. It's asking a lot of himself, David, but I think he remembers last year when he had such bad preparation, and he played the French and had to pull out after winning a few matches, and to protect himself, to protect the knee, and played a grass court event, and Felix destroyed him, and yet he still got to the quarters of Wimbledon. And I think he said to himself, if I can do that essentially on one knee, why can't I can understand the reasoning. But of course, he's also going to be a couple of years older by the time he went back to Wimbledon next year. So yeah, I'm not betting either way. I suspect he is going to give it a go next year. And if by the end of Wimbledon next year, things are just not turning, and he lost early there, and he just felt that he wasn't up to it anymore, it's no shame. But I actually do expect to see him out there, unless there's some kind of serious setback when he plays Laver Cup in Basel. But if things go reasonably well physically there, and then I see him performing again next year.
Let's hope so. I'd love to be wrong with my prediction. So he's looking great, and hope good things for Roger. Serena Williams announcing she will be playing Wimbledon. She's playing doubles in Eastbourne this week with Ons Jabeur. Ons just won her tournament. We all know how entertaining Ons is. Very disappointing result at the French, and Ons was hot coming in the French. Ons is great. I'm looking forward to seeing her have a big run at Wimbledon. Serena Williams, though, what can you expect? I don't think the fear factor is there with, her intimidation factor is there anymore. Definitely not as much as it once was to many of the players in the locker room. That being said, she's still Serena. She hasn't played in a while, Steve. What do you think about this?
Well, we saw her leave last year. That's the last time we saw her leaving the center court in agony, having hurt herself badly. I don't know what she expects to get out of it, frankly, because with this kind of prep, in other words, we talked about Federer. I'm assuming next year, if he came into Wimbledon, David, he'd come in having played as many tournaments as he thought he could handle and has some match play under his belt and feels like he's ready to compete. Serena's coming in cold. And it's nice that she has so much respect for Wimbledon that she wants to go back and give it another go. But I mean, yes, there's some intimidation from some players, but how she wins more than a couple of matches is beyond me, given the time she's been gone. If she proves me wrong, all power to her. But I don't know I'm not sure what exactly she's expecting to get out of this, as opposed to if she had made a move to play a bunch of tournaments and gone to the French and see if she could win a few matches there, and then kept going on the grass and had some sense of full preparation. She's not going to have that. I think she's just hoping to do it on memory and inspiration, and that may not be enough.
Yeah, and always beware if you're going to doubt greatness. So for those that thinking maybe she'll go out first round, again, beware. You're dealing with greatness. So let's see.
You're right about that. I'm not saying that I'm just saying for her to win more than a couple of matches it would be a remarkable effort if we saw her in the second week. I would be really surprised, but Serena, let's see what she can do here. And she must feel like she's, in her practice sessions at home, there's something telling her that she can do this, or else she's not going to the All England club to embarrass herself.
Right. She obviously feels okay to do this. If she didn't feel well or knew she wasn't, she couldn't make any noise, I don't think she would go. She wouldn't have to. So I agree with you on that point. Couple items we've been asked to speak about, and you and I really haven't addressed it. We'll start with Wimbledon not awarding points, and in my opinion, is focused on two sets of players, right? One, you got the players who did amazingly well last year. They're going to lose all those points, right? The Novaks, Matteo Berrettini. Then you look at it from the other side. Let's say you're a guy 100, 150th in the world, and you have a dream week or a dream 2 weeks, right? Let's say you make the round of 16 or the quarters. You're not going to get the benefit of those points. And for the players at that lower level, that's huge, because that can get them into main draw tournaments going forward, and they don't have to be in the qualifying. And we all know how hard it is to get out of that circle in qualifying. Again, we've been asked about it. I'm eager to hear your thoughts on it.
David, I've just never understood. I understood why the ATP and WTA objected vehemently to what Wimbledon did. From their standpoint, they thought it was totally went against their guidelines to bar any players that had met the qualifications. Okay, so I understood that they issued a statement initially that said, we don't like this, we disagree with it. But then to take the step of taking the points away has had me shaking my head ever since, because it's their constituency, it's their players. Some of it is what you just mentioned. What about somebody going on a big run this year? What about a Shapovalov who was in the semis last year and he could get back there, but it's as if he never played in terms of their computer ranking. So he loses the semifinal points. Novak loses the 2,000 points for winning it. Berrettini, I think 1,200 for getting the finals. It doesn't make any sense with Berrettini's on a great run right now. Maybe he gets back to the final, maybe not. But I don't get it, because the people being punished are their own players who have done nothing. And they're not taking the stance, David, the ATP and WTA. They're not taking a stance saying, we want our players to boycott Wimbledon. We think this is wrong. That would have been a different stance altogether, and I wouldn't have agreed with it. But what I'm saying is there would have been some consistency, because you would have said, no, we disagree with Wimbledon. That's not what they're doing. So if you're giving the players the green light, which they are, to compete at Wimbledon, they really should be getting points. I think it's just an absolute shame, because it's an injustice to all of those people. Someone like Fucsovics last year had a great run, 16s or quarters, lost to Novak. He's probably not going to be able to do that this year, but suppose he did. He comes back and has another good tournament. It's as if he didn't play in terms of computer rankings.
You're hurting your own is what you've emphasized, and it doesn't make a lot of sense, right?
No, it doesn't. I think they feel, and in fairness to the ATP and WTA, I don't think they were trying to be vengeful. They were trying to use whatever clout they had to say to Wimbledon, oh, well, if you're going to ban the Russians and Belarusians, then we're going to do this. But this is not an appropriate counter to what Wimbledon, it's just not. It's their own players. And also, I don't think it's fair to diminish Wimbledon, to try to diminish Wimbledon in that way. It's the most prestigious event in the sports, the preeminent tournament in tennis. I think they deserve more respect because also then you have the likes of Osaka, David, who had said immediately, she's pulled out now because for physical reasons now, but her initial reaction right off the bat was, well, if there are no points, I don't know if I'll play. And they opened the door for that. I don't think that the ATP and WTA really want their players looking at it that way, but they've sort of invited that by the stance they've taken. I'm perplexed, and I'm saddened by Marshall Happer, who ran the Men's Tennis Council in the 1980s. He was the closest thing we had to a commissioner, wrote an editorial that he sent out this week being very critical of the decision as well. And he also didn't like Wimbledon's initial decision. He just felt that this was not the right response. Now, maybe the ATP and WTA would say they had no other, or this was their only option. Okay, then maybe don't take it and just stick by your statement. We disagree. We feel Wimbledon has done the wrong thing, and they could have kept trying to negotiate with Wimbledon behind the scenes to reconsider. But once the decision was made, and I respect what Wimbledon did, I think that decision, David, was a coin flip. I mean, you could make a strong argument on either side of that one, but I think that Wimbledon deciding to ban those players. But the decision by the ATP and the WTA, in my view, is I don't think there is a defense. I think most people would say it's the wrong response. And I say that with the greatest of respect for the likes of Steve Simon and Gaudenzi, who I think they really have they believe they have the best interests of the sport at heart here. But I just think they've made I just think their judgment was wrong in this case.
Sticking on this topic, Wimbledon obviously is not allowing players from Russia and Belarus to compete. The U.S. Open just came out announcing that they are allowing Russian and Belarus players to compete. And then something somewhat, I don't say it's related, but it's kind of goofy here. Right, as of today, Novak Djokovic would not be allowed to play in the U.S. Open because he's unvaccinated. And correct me if I'm wrong, Steve. Novak's unvaccinated. They're not allowing him to play in the U.S. Open. But yet, if you're a U.S. player, let's say, and I'll mention his name because he tweeted about it, Tennis Sangren, he's unvaccinated and he is allowed to play. Now, I would say, let's say there's a different strand, a more dangerous, threatening strand in wherever Novak's from, and they're worried about someone coming in like Novak and making a bigger risk for the people in New York. That's not the case, right? So tennis walking around and Novak walking around pose the same risk. Am I correct in that?
Of course they do. Of course they do. They're going to be around fellow players. What are you going to do? Are you going to bar that? You bar a tennis would not be allowed to go into the player lounge for fear that he could possibly pass the virus on to some other player. That was a puzzling decision. I understand the USTA saying about Novak, and I just wish he would change his mind and take the vaccine. That's another story. And I feel badly about what he went through in Australia, which was way over the top, being used as a political pawn. We don't need to revisit that. But as far as the Open is concerned, I understand that they would say there will be no exemptions because they saw what happened in the Novak case and they didn't want to have a battle going on where they're saying, well, we think Novak, we want him back. We want to find, we're going to give him a special exemption given his status in the game. And then suddenly the US government started fighting. They wanted to avoid that. I understand that. But why they wouldn't just carry through and say to the Tennis Sangrens or any other American players who might not have taken the vaccine, listen, guys, you're only getting in this tournament. You must take the vaccine. You must take it and decide how many of the shots you must have taken, by the way, because most people at this point have had 4. But you don't exclude tennis while Sandgren while barring Novak Djokovic.
You don't exclude tennis from not being able to play. So you're including tennis being able to play, but not Novak. Again, it's not like there's a more dangerous strand where Novak is and you're worried about that.
No, that's because I suppose they would argue that the government wouldn't, because he's American, he's allowed back in the country, so they don't have an issue with government control. I'm not sure what their answer would be to that, but they have to be concerned about what's going on their own grounds, in their own player areas, dining areas,
Right.
play lounge, all of it. So he would pose the same threat theoretically as Novak.
Right.
I think they would have covered themselves beautifully had they said that. We also we reinforce that, yes, Novak Djokovic, unless he were to take the vaccine, is not allowed to come here. But we also are not letting any of our own native born players compete unless they can verify their vaccine status as well. Then I think that would have they would have been fine. But I think that now they'll probably catch some flack for it. Meantime,
let's see what happens. I mean, we're still a ways away. We're a few months away. But yeah, it just seems a little goofy that you allow some unvaccinated players to play if they're from our country, but not other unvaccinated players from outside of our country.
Yeah. Meantime, they saw that Wimbledon was so sharply criticized by the ATP and WTA for making the choice on the Russian and Belarusian players. So I think the USTA, I understand what they were doing there. They thought, you know what? We don't need that kind of aggravation, and there's such a strong argument that they should be allowed to play. We're letting them play. That I understand much better than the decision vis-a-vis Djokovic and Sandgren.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Interesting times. Something that the federal government and the people in charge of the WTA and the ATP wish they did not have to deal with pre a global pandemic. We'll see how this plays out. There's a lot of moving parts.
You're right, David, but you mentioned that something could change. It's true, but to me, it's unlikely between now and the Open that suddenly there's a feeling by the United States government that, no, it's okay. We're going to allow, I don't see them. I'd be really surprised. And we're sitting here now in June, getting to the latter stages of June. I don't see 2 months from now the situation being different. And so I do think in Djokovic's case, he's going to have to weigh this. And I don't think he's going to play. I don't think he's going to change his mind because I think, frankly, he would have probably by now done it. On the other hand, he's been permitted to play in all these other places, all through the clay court circuit and back in regular circulation again, and able to go back to Wimbledon to try to defend his title. So that's sort of given him something of a reprieve, a chance to just put it aside and play. But now the decision making is upon him again, and I don't believe I think he's so adamant, and I think we're going to miss him at the Open this year. That's my prediction.
Wow, and it is interesting, if he sticks with his guns, and it seems like he is, at least at this moment. He's talked about how he wants the most slams, right? And he's now 2 behind Rafa. And if this happens at the Open, let's say he doesn't win Wimbledon. Let's say he's not allowed to play at the Open. Now you're in Australia again. And let's say Rafa even wins another one. Now he's 3 back. It's interesting to see how this all plays out. And it'll be interesting years from now, looking back at the history of the Big Three, what effect this did have on the race of the most slams.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And the scenario you mentioned, I just wonder whether Novak, 5-10 years from now, looks back and he's interviewed and he says, yeah, I look back on that period with great regret, because nobody has been more committed. It's not that Rafa and Roger haven't tried to win every Grand Slam title they possibly can, and that the race doesn't mean a great deal to them, because it does. And Rafa downplays it all the time, but it means much more to him than he's letting on. He's just taking pressure off himself.
Right.
But nobody's been so upfront and clear about what he wants to achieve in this game. And there he was closing in on the Grand Slam last year, 1 match away at the US Open, and turned in a subpar performance, and Medvedev was great and the chance was gone. But who would have thought that he would then miss the Australian? Rafa would win it improbably. Then Novak's in better form than Rafa coming into the French, and up until they met at the French, and Rafa topples him there and wins the title for the 14th time to move 2 ahead. These are, none of us could have foreseen this, that Rafa.
We had mentioned it. We had mentioned it on the year end, but it was pretty improbable. It wasn't. You wouldn't expect it.
Very improbable. But I got to believe that Djokovic, who's not personally resentful of Nadal, he has great respect for Nadal, but it has to be just internally eating away at him in some respects. And I mean, especially if he didn't win Wimbledon. If he's able to come back and win Wimbledon, I do believe he's the clear favorite. There are scenarios where a Hurkacz or a Felix, or there are guys that can win this title, surely. But Novak is the one who's proven himself there time and again. He's won this tournament the last 3 times he's played there. So he is the clear 18, 19, and 21. There was no tournament in 20. So I think he's coming in confident, and that would help him a lot. But let's just say that's the scenario, and he wins Wimbledon, but then can't play the Open with a chance to tie Rafa again. It's self-defeating, and I know he would defend it on the grounds of principle, what he wants to put into his body. I get that. I just think he's getting the wrong information, and he's such a bright guy, but somehow he's been convinced that this is something really dangerous. When he did the elbow surgery several years ago, he got over that, and he benefited, and he's benefited ever since. And if he would have taken this, his life would have been a lot easier, and he wouldn't have been in a position to perhaps miss 2 majors this year, 2 of the 4, both on hard courts. Can you imagine?
I know, and it's a shame, because when you talk about this and you talk about the greatest of all time, you want everything to be decided inside those lines, right? And unfortunately, and we don't know how it will all pan out. That's for the future, and we'll see how it will all pan out in the coming years. But right now, things are happening that are a result of not occurring all in between the white lines, and that's a shame. And
just want to add one thing, David, one more time, because people are always so critical of Novak. And I just want to say this, I don't agree with his stance, as I've made clear, but I have sympathy for the fact that somehow he's got it in his head. In other words, this to me is not an ego question. Some people think it's just a great player with a big name flexing his muscles saying, you've got to accommodate me, I'm Novak Djokovic. And that's never been what this is about. It's been about his, what I consider kind of a bizarre stance on the vaccine. And he's been willing to give up. And I think he'll be willing to give up playing the US Open for the same reasons he was willing to not play Australia, if that's what it came to. And I think people should see that side of the coin a little more clearly. You can criticize the judgment, but this is not, to me, an athlete with an oversized ego. I don't think that's.
Do you think? Let me ask you this, Steve. Do you think it's either misinformation that he's getting and why he won't take it, or 2, he's so and this is, I mean, these are all athletes, right? Professional athletes. Your body is your commodity. Is he so worried? And we don't know the long-term effects of these vaccines, right? They say they're safe, but this is new for everybody. We don't know the long-term effects. Do you think he is so strict on his body as a commodity that he's not willing to risk this vaccine going into his body? It could be as simple as that.
Well, I think that's largely what it is, but I do believe that that's misinformation. You're right that we don't know fully, but most of the medical community, the preponderance, the vast majority, are saying, no, this is safe long-term, not just short-term, and this is what we must do. And yeah, I think it's based on misinformation, but he sees his body as a temple and he does not want to do it. I'm just saying, I think people should see that, and you can shake your heads and be anguished. And I know I am personally, as an ardent admirer of his, to see this happening to him. But I think that's really what it comes down to. And so it's not unprincipled. It's just misguided, in my view.
Yeah. Well, we've spent quite a bit of time talking about stuff that's not happening on the tennis court, and more time talking about things that are happening off the tennis court. We'll see how this all develops. It is obviously very interesting. We got Wimbledon coming up 1 week from today. Will be first ball. The qualies are this week. You and I will record again once the draw comes out, before first ball is hit. We'll be able to go a little bit more in detail once we see certain players' paths on what could possibly happen over the Wimbledon fortnight. I'm excited. I know you are. Can't wait to do this again.
Looking forward to it, David. As usual, a stimulating discussion. And I think we're in for a great fortnight at Wimbledon. And with or without all this controversy over the points, there's one thing is certain: the players are going to go there with the same attitude they do every year, knowing that they are playing the most important tournament in the game of tennis.
No doubt.
And realizing that the sports world is paying attention in a way that they don't at any other time of the year in tennis, including the US Open. And that's no knock on the US Open, because especially for the American fans, it's a across a fortnight, but this Wimbledon fortnight is unlike any other.
No disagreement from me, Steve. Thanks again, and looking forward to talking again when we'll be able to dive deep into the draw.
Thank you, David.